One of my yoga teachers said you don't have to do a organized practice every
Hmm.
day for yoga. Just sit on the mat and
Hmm.
whatever poses come to you, do those poses and let that be your practice. And you started talking about energy and chi and
Yeah, because what I'm saying is that for the physical yoga practice, a physical yoga practice is one that begins to activate, stimulate the chi, the prana, those that vital life force. And we don't really recognize that our vital life force, of course, it gets us through the day-to-day activities that we do. However, it can become very dormant in the body. And so that we're just reacting in that little bit of vital force that we have, which basically keeps us alive, is doing the very minimum. When you do a physical yoga practice, it begins to stimulate that, activate it, move the chi, move that energetic body more so that when we eventually then try to move to the other aspects of yoga practice, right? So I'm not talking, pranayama is a physical yoga practice. That's one. But when we're going to something like meditation, in order to be able to sit for meditation and to tolerate and be patient with the process of meditation, to get your spirit right, to tolerate that or to help us with that, it has to have some level of discipline. And otherwise we take ourselves in a very primitive, I don't want to say primitive state, but a very immature state or emotional state to sit in meditation. And we find it challenging and difficult because we're still reacting to what's happening here in our mind. And what happens in our mind begins to the reaction of that is an emotional reaction. And so we can't separate the emotional reaction to what we're having when we're thinking. And the discipline that takes is to have a vitality, an energetic vitality enough to be able to separate ourselves and say, okay, wait a minute, this is just um, these are just thoughts that are happening in my mind, but I don't necessarily have to own them in my body as physical and emotional reactions. Or we get to observe how our memories, our thoughts, our perceptions affect us. That is what svadhyaya is to me. That's self study. When we're able to sit back and look at our own reactions physically and emotionally that we're having in our body to those thoughts and reactions that are happening in our mind. You know, why am I reacting these? When we begin to unpack those particular emotional responses we're having to what we're thinking, feeling, and perceiving, that to me is what meditation is. That's the
yeah,
strength of
I
meditation.
never heard. I know that yoga, doing yoga before helps to settle into meditation, but I thought it was a physical thing. To me, I'm restless. And
Mm-hmm.
so doing the yoga kind of works out all of that restlessness. And I do sit still physically better.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some yoga stretches ahead of time. I've never thought about what you said with raising the vitality, although that makes sense to me on some level. I didn't think that's what the yoga part was for.
Yeah, well, it's all in how the vitality of your body is moving. So for you, you may already have a lot of energy.
Hmm.
And so because you're already your vitality is much more energetic and you can go about your day, it is something that settles you down. But not that's not for everybody.
Okay,
Some
that's
of
interesting.
us, we need to rev up the
Hmm.
vitality of our bodies
Okay.
in order to then be in our bodies, because a lot of us are living from the neck up, right? So we're here and have no real concept of what's happening in our bodies. I find that folks who find exercise, walking, movement challenging
Hmm.
is because they're living in their head
People
more
who
so
find it
than
challenging, say more about that. Finding walking. Is it the walking or is it kind of like getting out the door? Like
it's
what's challenge?
moving. It's just movement.
Oh, that's so interesting. I've never
It's
heard that
movement in general. And so even folks who we call couch potatoes, so
before.
they're distracting themselves mentally with television, whatever, devices or whatever, rather than have an experience of living in their body,
Hmm.
fully living in their body. Okay, but because they're here. because to live for whatever reason, being deeper in their body is painful. For whatever reason, their perception of that becomes more painful. And so then when you begin to move, so whatever experience has had that led me to be that person who is not comfortable with moving,
Hmm.
and I start moving
Mhm.
and I start experiencing a little ache and pain, I'm going to default back to nope, that's painful. I don't want to do that. That's been my experience with students and folks who just don't want to move.
How are you meeting people as a yoga teacher who don't want to move, though? I'm confused at that.
Because they're coming, well, remember, I have a whole wellness practice. So folks come to me because they're like, I need to change my diet, or I heard that this herb is going to help me better. Or occasionally it is because I need a yoga therapist. My doctor said, try this. So, whatever reason, my friend told me to try this. Whatever way that you come to me as a wellness practitioner, you can only get a holistic approach to me. And I know that as human creatures, human beings have to move. We designed to move. So at some point during whatever our conversation is, we're going to get to that conversation. It doesn't necessarily have to be yoga. I just think that yoga, because of the spectrum of how yoga can move you versus you in your chair, lying on the floor in your bed, having a full mat practice, the principles of alignment and movement, the energetics of it is going to be beneficial. So at some point I'm going to give you that offering. And so what I'm finding though, that depending on, who my clients are that come to me, most haven't moved in a long time.
That's so
They haven't
interesting.
moved. Their movement is, driving their car, going to work, sitting down, but not really having a beautiful experience of being in their bodies.
Mm.
What does that mean to be in your bodies? Unless their body is giving them some signal that I'm in pain.